Right, so you know, Richard actually has me doing two things. So I got a cool presentation on my prediction markets work and my goals for that. But then he wanted me to do Drivechain Q&A or Sidechains Q&A, and so that's kind of what this is one, right? It's the earlier one. So I hope there are some good questions, but otherwise I can kind of just give the same talk that I gave at Breaking on Bitcoin yesterday.
Yes. What would you? Yeah, we're going to do that later.
Yeah, or you can do.
What would you prefer? Because I could just kick off with a couple of questions.
I think that would maybe be good.
Let's just start.
Yes.
How many here know about what sidechains are and drivechains?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So it might be nice just to start with a brief introduction
Okay.
on what they are,
Yes.
and then anyone else who has questions can jump in.
Yeah, that's good. That was a great first question. So the sidechains are very similar to altcoins, where you use a completely different piece of independent software. Although the trick is that sometimes you would not want it to be totally independent, but the point is you have the freedom to make something that's completely different and make all of the mistakes that you want and wreck everything, or come up with something really cool. So it's a kind of freedom. That's the shtick for it, that it's like permissionless innovation, and if you want larger blocks or you want these weird Turing complete smart contracts or something, or any other crazy idea that you have, you can do that. But these, unlike altcoins, they respect the 21 million coin limit in Bitcoin. So they all share the same 21 million coins. The coins are mined on Bitcoin. You know, whatever the main chain is, but in this case, in this framework, it would be Bitcoin Core. And the coins are mined there, and then you send them over to this new piece of software that receives them, and then over there you can play around with them and give them to new owners, spend them on weird transactions, do crazy stuff, prediction market stuff, or rent hard drive space or something like that, and then then the new owners can whenever they want, they can send them back. And there's a lot of details on making that work without it being too insecure, or without the whole thing immediately regressing to just being a giant hard fork of Bitcoin or these other things. So there's a lot of nuances to that. But basically it's altcoins that don't have an independent coin. They just have the same 21 million Bitcoins. And so they're a kind of response to interest in altcoins. Just say, well, they have a long history, first of all, which is kind of interesting. So maybe we'll talk about it if people are interested. But the idea of the sidechain is really a response to the idea of the altcoin, and just say, well, we can do exactly what that thing does, but just on Bitcoin, and then you can go off. People have disagreements over what to do. They can have their own piece of software. So that's kind of the very short version. And a clever thing you can do is have the sidechains be merge mined the way Namecoin was, so that even though there's no coins being minted over there, they still get all of the hash rate of Bitcoin. So, the goal is to have it be something that just completely replaces altcoins, kind of. Although I'm not sure. They wouldn't replace like a community or different set of owners or things like that. But it's a kind of. It tries to do a lot of things at once. So it tries to do permissionless innovation, but it also tries to protect the integrity of Bitcoin by not making it too vulnerable to these to caring about what other people think it should be. Because they just say, well, right now, if you want to change Bitcoin, you have to change it for everyone. It's this consensus system. Everyone needs consensus down to the last byte. But with this, you could just say, well, if you want to do something different, you just do it out on your own sidechain, and it's no different from installing apps on your phone. And the apps don't almost never affect each other. And so that is the goal for sidechains as well, that you would not have any weird sidechains that broke the sidechain system, but that you would have this ecosystem of sort of a freedom, basically, where anyone could create a piece of software or use a piece of software. So it's pretty important. It adds a kind of universality to Bitcoin, which is pretty ideal. Also, yes. Oh yeah, do you have a question? Real question. Let's do it.
I wonder, is Drivechain fundamentally different from Sidechain, or is it your implementation of Sidechain?
Yeah, I usually explain it as being my implementation of sidechains, but I suppose there are, for a long time, so Blockstream wrote a paper in 2014, and then they did some work on sidechains, but then they kind of really stopped working on them for a while, and then I published the design for Drivechain in 2015, and then in late 2015, like November, and then in 2016 I kind of worked on it to make it real, and so then for a long time I was introducing it as the implementation of sidechains, but now Blockstream is sort of caught up a little bit, and they kind of have done a little bit more on making their original thing real, and their design is a little different, but I think they're very similar actually, but I think mine is actually a lot better, and for a couple of reasons that I could go through, but they're a little dry. But one thing about theirs is that that's a relatively simple point, and that is that it only works for sidechains that have a very similar block format, transaction format, and hashing functions, and whereas mine just works for anything. Mine could work. In fact, I think it would be totally impossible to get theirs to work for something like Mimblewimble, but I'm not sure about that. It might be possible, but with mine it would be possible.
More questions? Anyone? Yeah.
Is Sidechain
Yes.
more like a sandbox where you make use of the technique of blockchain of Bitcoin, but you can still experiment with it like a sandbox?
Yes, so yeah, the question is like, is it sort of like a sandbox? Yeah, I think the answer is yes. There's someone might ask like, why don't we already have a sandbox, which is just make your own altcoin or something? But that is, the people who use that argument, I think that there's something that's wrong about that that's very difficult to articulate, but I think I have a decent way, which is that it's kind of as if you were going out to dinner with a bunch of friends, and then you would say, even though there's nothing, like no one's holding a gun to your head and forcing you to go to anywhere you don't want to go, one person, one friend can't like unilaterally defect and just say, well, I want to try going to this place. Because the important thing is that you get to the same restaurant as everyone else. That's like a key second. You want to go to a good restaurant that you like, but you really want to go to the same restaurant that everyone else is going to. And in that sense, the altcoins are, they're a non-starter. They're totally useless. You're starting this thing up completely alone, and then you're going to get a lot of people who are not in it for the long haul. You get the wrong type of early adopter in many cases. And so the altcoins are really not a true sandbox, but this would be, because this would be real Bitcoin on the line, and if anyone steals them, or if something is wrong with your node, or something happens, you'd be able to exchange them for actual real Bitcoin. So you would inherit. It's kind of more like going to like a food court or something where everyone can go to their own place, but you're still all in the same. You can still sit at the same table or something like that. So yeah, that it adds a sandbox dimension that is really not there right now. Yes. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-on on that. If you're not a Bitcoin maximalist and you just really like altcoins, what would be the advantage for you to actually do right in this?
Yeah.
Is it, just a side question on that, is it, since you're an economist, is it that Bitcoin could provide a certain security and be a reserve currency? Is there a real advantage to that?
Well, people use the word security in many, many different ways. Sometimes they talk about hash rate, sometimes they talk about whatever, and not getting your funds stolen, or something like that. But I think one reason is actually, it's kind of a strange, it's horrible to forecast the death of the altcoins, because you're just wrong every year, and every year you just look crazier and crazier. But I think that one reason would really just be self-defense, because if some blockchain makes the jump to universality first, you would think, like, why wouldn't it instantly replace all of the other blockchains? Now you can imagine a couple reasons why it wouldn't happen very quickly, and then it may not happen at all, and there may still be a place for lots of different competing projects. But on the other hand, there are strong network effects when you use money, and there are these people, like, it's a little easier for me because I grew up learning English, and even if I travel all around the world, a lot of people speak English just because it's just so convenient to have. You need, like, having one common language is just so helpful that it's just, you know. And in fact, I saw on this trip that I was in, there was someone who was clearly like German and someone who was clearly Portuguese, and they are having a business meeting and they're speaking English, of course. So it's like everyone uses basically the same QWERTY keyboard, even if they use Dvorak or something to change the key layout. And we just have these things, these standardizations are just very efficient. So you'd think over time it would be drawn towards just one thing, and you would not want to be in a position where, like, since investing is involved, people would be looking to the future and they'd be thinking, you know, would I rather have, you know, all this Dogecoin or something, or would I rather have like a new car or something like that? You know, you think like, oh, I can sell this digital currency that I have and get something real. And the only reason you wouldn't would be is if you really thought that it had a pretty good, either a future of appreciation or just kind of being useful as money. And so self-defense, I think, is a reason, is that if you like your altcoin project, and there are other reasons as well, like, you know, if you just want to plug into the Bitcoin community and try to get more users, try to get better, more honest feedback about the things that you're doing right, because the altcoin world is, you know, beset by crazy marketing and just kind of generally a very confusing media ecology, to phrase it in some way. It's like, it's very hard to figure out, like, do people really like this project, or are they just pumping the project? Like, what is going on? Like, so there are a couple of reasons. Like, if you've got a really good project that's underappreciated, this is your chance to kind of prove that it has a kind of, that you really kind of do care about it and not the speculative return. So there are a couple of reasons like that, but I think self-defense is really the main one, is that, like, well, you know, if you don't, then someone will just copy this project, and then it'll be tough. You'll be the guy you'll be the last guy who doesn't speak English, just trying to hold out against everyone else. I don't know, that might work, but maybe not. Yes.
About 1 year ago, I was trying to understand in details Sidechains or Drivechains, and I couldn't, because I found a lot of descriptions, but without every detail that helped me understand if there is any detail that prevents to do this safely or something, because, you know, sometimes one detail can make it not good solution. So do you have some description with every detail?
Yeah, I think if you're interested in that, we do have, so we've tried to make it better and better. It's very interesting because, you know, sometimes people complain like, oh, this is too long. I get that complaint all the time. So people complain, not enough detail, too much detail, whatever. But I understand what you're saying. And now we have, if you go to drivechain.info, we actually have the diff. So we have all the code changes to the latest release of Bitcoin Core in one place. So that would be the optimal amount of, just all the literal details are exactly there. I don't know if that's not necessarily a kind of an explanation, but we also have I also have a BIP that you can see if you go to drivechain.info and you go to GitHub, and then you will be able to find it in docs section, where I have pull requested into the BIPs repository for Bitcoin Core. And so that has much more detail, and I don't remember exactly when did I write that. It's probably January of this year. So if you tried last year, then that wasn't there, but now both of those things are there now, so maybe that will help you. I don't know. Are you more like interested in, because we have every line of code changed or altered or deleted or whatever. So that's one thing you could find if you scroll down on the main page. And then also the BIP is like the explanation for Bitcoin programmers. And then I also recorded a video that's also on drivechain.info about the misconceptions that I think, and about the kind of has a more of an explanation feel. So those are all kind of advanced. And that video is 2 hours long. It has like 200 slides in it or something. So those have a lot of detail, and one of those might be helpful for you, I think. Maybe.
Okay, so right now you see that probably there is no any detail that can make this project to fail. I mean, you don't see such thing.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I think you're kind of getting at the idea that you don't. It's not really until you go through and write everything that you actually check and see that you've actually thought everything through. But yeah, I think this has actually been in a kind of peer review state for a very long time, despite how it may appear. But people have been kind of talking about this for a while, and I don't. We have a code and we have a unit test, and I really wanted to, before this trip, I really wanted to release an actual test net that has a GUI, it has a cool little GUI that someone made, and so we have kind of done the whole thing as far as like minimum viable product or whatever phrase you would like to use. So I don't think there's any. Sidechains are definitely different, and so I don't know if everyone will want to use them. And absolutely, it's in a very similar situation to the Lightning Network, where only a very special type of person should be using them first, But there's like a ramp up here where if people use them and then better and better user interface, make sure that there's no bugs, stuff like that. So
because this is described as a low-level trust, it's not described as something trustless. I mean, to sending coins to sidechain and back, right?
There is, I think you can recast it, because I actually would like certain sidechains never to exist, and I would want them to not be in the ecosystem at all. And so you can recast it as saying that miners will care enough, as long as it's very easy psychologically for them to figure out what's going on, which is a very big that's a big thing, although I have, this design elements to address that, but I realize that's kind of a vague thing to just kind of say in the middle of an explanation, so we can come back to that if you want. But as long as miners can kind of psychologically process what this sidechain is supposed to be doing, and as long as you check to see if it's doing that thing, then I'm okay with them curating like the list of which sidechains are on and which are off. And when you recast it that way, I'm just assuming that they will want the ones that make the exchange rate go up and stay up to be on, and the ones that make the exchange rate go down because they're harmful to the Bitcoin network actually. You'd want them to shut those off. And so if you recast it in those terms, it's no longer a question of trusting the miners. It's just, do you believe this security model that a majority of hash rate is not trying to make the network any worse? And so I think it actually rests on the exact same axiom that regular Bitcoin rests on. Although, again, it is slightly, it's very difficult to explain, because like Lightning Network also has all these weird quirks and things, and it's like, is it trustless? Are you trusting that you have these outsourced channel monitoring, and you have if your computer has a glitch and it accidentally broadcasts the wrong thing, you lose your entire channel balance. So, and I like the Lightning Network a lot. I'm not trying to criticize the Lightning Network. I'm just saying that these things that have different security models, it's sort of like, what exactly, what kind of answer can you really give? If it's like, yeah, the security model is different, but I think it really rests on the exact same security assumptions, I would say. That's what I would say. I don't know if does that help?
Yeah, that's good. So the last question. So you think it makes sense to combine sidechains with Lightning Network?
Oh, absolutely,
which can be cross-chain, so then you can offer through others. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really underappreciated. In fact, the cross-chain Lightning Network stuff is, well, in particular cross-chain atomic swaps, but I think that stuff is very exciting. You could have a situation where someone, because I would imagine that, well, first of all, the withdrawing your money from the sidechain to the main chain is intentionally very slow to make it more secure. And so I'm relying on regular users to never do that any more than we would like, a bunch of friends would engage in like a random military operation or something like that. You don't only have like some certain people care about. So instead, they should be using atomic swaps and Lightning Network transactions to move back and forth between the chains. But the other interesting thing is that if you make a sidechain that has a cool feature, it might not be enough coins over there Because who would want to leave their coins on this other new thing when instead you could just do nothing and stay where your coins are? People like to do nothing. It's a safe psychological thing. So the advantage of combining the two is that, oh, someone now has an incentive to just put some coins over there, start up a new Lightning channel thing, connect it to a big node. And remember, the nodes on the Lightning Network are independent of any chain. They could be on any, well, that's kind of speaking a little loosely, but you could have like a big, if everything on Bitcoin network is connected to like a big hub somewhere, hypothetically, just to make the explanation simpler. Everything connected on a big hub, and then you have the guy administering that hub has a different one on the sidechain. You connect over there. Then you can have these payments go right through. So what I'm getting at is that there's an incentive to move the Bitcoins over to the sidechain and then charge higher fees on your Lightning channel node. And in so doing, you get a little return for yourself, and people are allowed to use the new service or feature even if they don't have any coins on the sidechain. So if you're paying for some really strange thing, like, I don't know, a digital identity lookup or something, you just pay, and somehow the Lightning Network routes it to this other person, and it happens on the sidechain, and then they ship some piece of data back to you. That's kind of complicated, and there's a lot of steps to that, but it is kind of possible. So it's another benefit of combining the two, and there are lots of benefits. Yes.
So we use the sidechain concept. We're saying we take this one chain's consensus mechanism which has some feature we don't like, and we're extending this chain's consensus feature with a whole new chain. It's like subjecting this other consensus mechanism to this one chain. In sidechains, actually, you're tying together a different consensus mechanism to this main chain, usually in an effort to move the coins from the main chain to the second chain. But when we do atomic swaps, we usually swap one coin for the other. Why don't we move the coins themselves across networks?
Well, I think in atomic swaps, it's because it's impossible, right? Because you'd have to have one network be aware. You'd have to have both networks be aware of each other, and so they'd have to have combined to just be like one big network. And the way atomic swaps work is that it's just like I will pay. I want to pay like 1 Bitcoin to Richard, and then he wants to pay 4 Litecoin to me or something. And so I make some secret R, random number, and then I compute H, and then I say, okay, I'll give you 1 Bitcoin if the R is revealed for this H. I have the lock, which is H, and I have the key, which is R. And I say, here it is, but it only unlocks if I use this key, and then he uses the same lock for the 4 Litecoin transfer to me. But all the individual networks see is that it's just one transaction. And the Bitcoin network only sees the one part, and the Litecoin network only sees the other part, and then I say R, and it unlocks both of them at the same time.
A example would be to say that if you transfer any other coin towards Bitcoin, the way we express is if we take their whole coins and we put them as Satoshi on Bitcoin, and we just call it this coin. So
yeah.
For example, maybe this is the most naive way to do it. But
well, yeah, it's like a colored coin type
thing.
thing.
Sort of concept of foreign currency, that there's a currency by which we do consensus, by which we do priority on the network, and other currencies we just keep them as data. So you can move around this data, which is like a Litecoin, throughout the Bitcoin network, and then you can even move it never back to the Litecoin network and use the Litecoin's finite distribution. So that's the gimmick. You have to maintain the finiteness of the distribution as it was originally done on the original network. But if you can do that sort of like move between chains atomically, I feel like the difference between a sidechain and another chain altogether disappears, at least functionally.
Well, I think it's kind of a strange example, but I think the point of the sidechain is that you'd want to use Bitcoin for something new. So you want to move Bitcoin through like a new function or a new contract or something. So a contract that does these like betting or identity, or that looks up the DNS for something, or these other things, messaging or whatever. So you'd want to use it or just larger blocks or something like that. So you'd want to say, okay, I'd like to do something where I send a Bitcoin in a transaction that doesn't consume a high percentage of the total space or something like that. So you want to use the Bitcoin for something new, and then you want, when you send the Bitcoin to whoever's providing the service, or you send Bitcoin to someone else, or you send it to the miners or whatever you do, your counterparty wants to get Bitcoin back, and so then that's kind of what's going on with sidechains, I think. Your example where you turn Litecoin into satoshis of Bitcoin that's kind of like so like colored coins or something like that. That's cool. Colored coins are good, but you can't. Of course, no. Color.
Bitcoin would understand that there is also other coins.
Oh yeah, of course there are. Yes.
And the idea is that if you can preserve the total amount of Litecoin, if that's
Yes.
fixed, if that's consistent, it doesn't matter how we account for it. It's like the banks using Bitcoin as a reserve. Another chain can use Bitcoin as a reserve.
I agree. Well, what you could do with a sidechain, you could have something that was very, very unlike Bitcoin in many ways, where you could just say, well, in this sidechain, everything has to be signed by some government authority or federal bank employee or something. So.
The benefit being a sidechain is supposed to be an independent chain that can each transact.
No, but that's what I'm trying to explain, is that with the sidechain, you're working with the main chain's currency, and so when you have a family of sidechains, everyone's using the same money, and so you're plugged into the same economic network. It's sort of like using the euros versus something else.
Of course, if you preserve values across chains, you preserve
Yes.
the economic network here. So that's not different.
Yes. Well, no, I'm saying individually, if you go to like the point of sale and you spend euros on something, that is different than if you spent whatever, anything else, US dollars, Canadian dollars or something.
But once, for example, my bank is able to hold
Yeah.
Bitcoin, I'll just transfer the Bitcoin to my bank, and from then I'll use my credit card or whatever, and I'll be transacting Bitcoin instead of euros. It's this concept of
Right.
preserving the coin distribution across different technological solutions. And sidechains are a way to take another technical solution, attach it to your current one, so that your current currency can also move there. That's one system.
Yes.
So it's like this integration of one systemness. But I feel like atomic swaps and being able to swap the currency onto other chains brings the same economic perspective, like the same.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. And
technically there is some differences. Because, for
Yes.
example, that my sidechain, if my sidechain is okay, but the main chain is fucked, then my sidechain is also fucked.
yes, that's true. Yes. So there are some differences. Well, yeah. So I understand what you're saying now, I think, which is that, and in fact, Lightning Network is an even better example because even the atomic swaps take really maybe 24 hours. In fact, you can't even use, the reason why atomic swaps never caught on as a weird anecdote is just that one person has the lock, and so you try to swap one Bitcoin for 4 Litecoin, and then one person can just wait and see if the exchange rate moves against them, and then they can say, well, the thing is timing out over 24 hours. And if the exchange rate moves against them, then they just forget about it, and then only if the exchange rate stays the same or moves up, and so then it ended up being kind of a mess. But Lightning Network's even better because it's much faster. So you could say, okay, my altcoin.
Please, if you
Yeah.
mention micropayment channels,
Yeah.
just say micropayment channels. Because when we say Lightning Network, we mean this like hugely complex
Okay.
set of possible
Yeah.
micropayment channel networks. And right now
Okay.
we're still fighting about how it should look, right? But
Well-
Lightning Network is like a concept.
Well, I kind of agree with you in general, but I think that actually in this case, I do mean the Lightning Network because what I'm saying, what you're saying is that someone will pay Litecoin or they'd pay something, weird coin, and it, or I think maybe you're saying it the other way, like someone could pay Bitcoin and then they could buy a service on the other thing, but whatever it means, you mean you're across 2 different chains at once, and that's why it kind of goes a little bit back to the self-defense reason I brought up before, which is that I think that does make a lot of sense as long as it even tolerates the exchange rate fluctuations as long as the transaction is fast enough. So you're right that you can completely get all the same benefits, but the one thing that you can't get is any guarantee that the altcoin will actually survive, because there will be, I really do think there will be a kind of like, there will be like 200 terrible altcoins, and then the 200th one will be the worst one, and everyone will sell that for the other 199 because now that sidechains are around. This is kind of like a theory, so this is a conjecture of mine. But it's like, this will all happen in everyone's mind, I think, very quickly. So there'll be 200 terrible, and then people will sell number 200. They'll realize that number 200 can't possibly compete because one of the 199 will be just copying these features with sidechains, and so it's doomed as an investment, as a kind of, a store of value, to use the phrase. And then number 199 will be like, wait, this is a mistake. We are not going to win this battle. And then it would just kind of, I don't really see why anyone why would anyone want to hold like even the second or the third largest? You would always be wondering, oh, is this going to be a big mistake? Am I going to lose everything here? Maybe I should put a couple percentage points into the biggest one, and the biggest one will be a kind of a tractor, I think. And so, but yeah, you are right that you don't need, if you have this market if altcoins stick around, which, it's weird, it's a very weird thought kind of theoretically and analytically, but just empirically they do better and better all the time. But yeah, if they stick around, you can do this thing where you don't actually need sidechains at all. But I think that's why I bring up the self-defense argument, which is that if one blockchain has this universality, it would probably tend to just replace all the other blockchains. But that is a lot of conjecture. So I don't know if that will be represented in reality. But
these sort of arguments, they apply. Like this effect applies.
Yeah.
The tendency to
Yeah.
want security.
Yeah.
Why would you always want more? And usually
Yeah.
there's just some sort of limit beyond which people don't care anymore, and then the effect stops having power. And without power, the effect doesn't express.
yeah,
So-
yeah. I think what you're saying is that right now there's been no weird collapsing of the altcoins, but it's so they kind of are still around. But that's exactly kind of what I think too, which is that it's safe to do nothing now. The other thing is that there's no easy way, although I think there will be very soon because I'm working on it myself. But there's no easy way to like short an altcoin right now. It's very difficult. But if it's easy, and especially if it's easy to buy like put options, so you buy a little bit of money and you get trustless put option, no counterparty risk. Yeah.
You can't even move them.
Yeah. And well, yeah. So, but the
It's an exit market now.
yeah.
If you pay more fee, you can exit earlier.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably the biggest advantage to Bitcoin Core is
Yeah.
if I'm a huge whale, I can buy a shit ton of Bitcoin Core and always pay the highest fee to get out first and sell in the market when the price was still the highest.
Yeah.
So as long as I get enough
Well,
other
maybe.
whales
I don't know
to
about
spread
any of
the
that.
coin across enough accounts. So if a whale is like accumulating in one account, he's breaking this like formal rule that makes the deal worse. So
Well, there's a lot of efficient markets hypothesis kind of stuff wrapped up in that.
It's so neat to have a coin where like everyone goes in, and if you try to do a bank run, big payer gets out first.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. Well, all I'm saying is that when you can short, and you can short without, the current issue is like counterparty risk, which is like why would anyone pay up, like, or the exchange will get hacked or something. So there are a lot of issues like what if there's not enough collateral or something like that. But if you can buy a put option, it just means that you'll go rich if the altcoin goes down in value, sometime in the next 5 years or something like that. So long-term put option. You buy it today with a little bit of Bitcoin, then you gain a lot of Bitcoin if the altcoin price goes down. Sometime in the next, by the end of the 5-year period. Yeah, so if you do that, then I don't really see why lots of people wouldn't research all these coins, figure out like because just the act of buying a put option does trigger selling because there's a difference in the implied price of this derivative world and the real world, and you can always buy low and sell high. So,
You cannot centralize my opinion of the price.
yeah,
You cannot
right.
have a place where you can push the price down and I'll think it's down.
Yeah. Anyway, long story short, the put options would drive the price down, and I think you would get self-fulfilling prophecies on many of these. People would figure out very easily. And then you would extract the entire market cap. So if the market cap is like $300 million, then someone at Goldman Sachs will figure out how to.
It's a very high price.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm hijacking the subject right now.
Oh, that's fine.
You were talking a while ago about oracles.
Oh yeah, yes I did. Yeah, I was in last year. I was in.
Short summary of your talk, understandable hash, if you want.
Okay, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I gave a talk at QCon in London last March about attempts to solve the Oracle problem, and it is recorded, and you can find it on bitcoinhivemind.com presentations, where I'll be talking about that later. But yeah, that talk was about a history of attempts to solve the Oracle problem, which is a problem of getting the blockchain to figure out something that may have happened in the real world. And it's very difficult because the primary difficulty is this opportunity cost of honesty. So if you have something, some financial anything that is tied to the real world performance of something. So an example that people often use is elections. So they say, okay, this thing is worth €1, 1 Bitcoin, let's say €1. It's worth €1 if Donald Trump is elected, and it's worth €1 if Hillary Clinton is elected in the United States. You know, just assume that you guys are aware of what happened for there. But the point is, it's worth something or it's worth nothing. But the trick is that the challenge is that you want to build something that does that. So you want to tie this payment to something that happened in the real world. And it's very difficult because once that information is learnable, so Donald Trump wins, Hillary Clinton loses, now if everything is working as planned, and you're doing a good job, best case scenario, then all the Donald Trump shares or coupons, or whatever you want to call them, they should be trading for basically €1, and the other one, the Hillary Clinton and whatever, Gary Johnson ones, they should be trading for 0. But since the information has to exist first, and then you have to use the Oracle to report on it, and then you have to pay people out. So the things they must happen in that sequence. So then you have a problem with step number 2, which is that someone, knowing that Donald Trump has won, would have an incentive to lie and say that he actually lost, because they can go up and buy all the stuff for basically 0, these useless Hillary Clinton shares, and then lie and flip the switch, and thereby they can extract the entire delta of the market position at all. So it's really no different than running an exchange. Being the Oracle is basically the same as running an exchange where you buy and sell this thing. Everyone has deposited with you, and they trust that you will put the right outcome out. But if you just put the wrong outcome out, you can steal everything. So there's a major challenge there, and I go through in the talk a kind of a historical journey that people have taken, where they started with multi-sig, and then now people are really not interested in that, and then people moved on to this kind of, we'll have these different arbiters compete, we'll have these different marketplace of judges, but I describe why I really don't think that can work. It's just multi-sig with like more competition, but it's not good enough because I just described 3 factors in the talk that the judges may suddenly, they have no reason not to exit scam. I guess it's a really short version of that, but the judges' incentives are triggered by 3 factors, which are all very unreliable. One is how much money they can make if they steal. So then someone might have, it's sort of like a super popular contract where they just set it up with their friends, but then suddenly $100 million goes on. And you don't know if that's going to happen when you set it up. So someone might bet, and then they're like, oh no, I didn't realize that everyone would start betting, and now $10 million would be on the line. And of course, this judge is going to lie and take $10 million for himself, and he's gone, you know? And so it's like, you're hoping it stays small, and the thefts pay out. But then also there's this other thing, the stream of little transaction fees that he might earn. That also could go down as the marketplace of judges becomes more competitive, and why wouldn't it, you know, if it were doing really well? And then how much the judge cares about the future relative to the present. You know, the judge could get brain cancer, or could just decide to exit scam for any other reason. And so all 3 of those are unreliable. So I described then what I did. Yes?
Those prediction exchanges or places, they could be even
Oh,
a lot
geez.
worse.
Yeah.
A lot worse than the Chinese, Korean, Russian exchange.
I can repeat it if you're saying it could be even worse than a Chinese-Russian exchange or something. Well, yeah, I think so, because a lot of the benefit to this type of thing would be that you want like trustlessness, you want like no identities. I mean, at least if there's an exchange, like people knew who like Mark Karpeles was, right, and they could like find him and harass him or something, you know, like you got something, you have some recourse. But with this, it's really kind of, the goal is to make it kind of blind. I mean, that's the ideal, the platonic ideal for all this stuff is that you sit on your computer and you just want to buy some Hillary Clinton defeat shares or something, and you just hit enter and it just happens, and you don't need to have figure out like, oh, is this a reputable exchange, or let me do all my due diligence on, whether or not it's installed.
In particular, want to have the last very short question before dinner? Is there one more question? Okay, this is the last one, and then we're going to have dinner.
Just a quick question. So, can you merge sidechains into the core chain?
Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting question. So you don't mean a code merge. You mean like the...
Meaning, if you make a sidechain...
You could make them mandatory, yeah.
Could you make like consensus and make it mandatory to the core?
Yeah, well, that's what you would... But I think the funny thing is I actually see, when you use the word merge, it reminds me of GitHub, where it's like, fork and merge. And I kind of feel that sidechains allow... It's kind of weird because those are abstract terms. But what I feel is that the sidechains are the merge operation, because it's like if you want to leave and go to the altcoin community, like you can never come back. But if you want to leave and go to the sidechains community, then you can move your money back. And so sidechains are kind of like, are the merge. But yeah, I think early on people thought that people thought that sidechains would be used mostly for testing experimental features that would then be merged into Bitcoin Core, but I don't think that anymore. Now that we see the conservatism of Core, but also the interest in crazy altcoins, and just the profound difference in vision that I think was probably foreseeable and inevitable as we get to just a bigger and bigger community, now it will be just for people who want to do different things. That will just stay there. So I don't think necessarily you would end up merging them back, but it is possible. In fact, it kind of happens almost naturally, because as more and more people use a set, it becomes much more difficult to imagine anyone getting away with an attack on one or the other without both of the communities like refusing to put up with it, which they can very easily. There's a huge asymmetry in Bitcoin and in sidechains that the users have a lot of leverage in any, UASFs or other things that they might want to do.
So what about a round of applause for Paul and the Q&A?
Thank you.